I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and this is The Radical Center, a recording project I began in 2022 as a way to describe and discuss the social and ideological currents that are rapidly altering our culture. In a time when political polarization seems to be the norm, I'm seeking to understand rather than react. I'm grateful to all the thoughtful men and women who share their stories and insights with me in this conversation series. If you would like to contribute to this project financially, there are links in the description. Thank you, and thank you all for listening and being part of this exploration. All right, well, today I am speaking with Josh Slocum of the Disaffected podcast. And Josh, this is the third time we've had the opportunity to talk in a recording, and I always enjoy speaking with you. I really enjoy your podcast too, and it's just a pleasure.
Likewise.
So I'm so
Thank
happy
you.
to be able to spend this time with you today.
All right. Shall we tell everybody about the stupid, terrible tech problems?
Yeah. It's like the theme of the month for me is tech problems. Yeah.
Well, when I jumped on here, because we thought maybe the listeners and viewers would be interested in this because it sparked something else. As we were getting ready, we had sound problems. I couldn't hear you, and then you couldn't hear me through the microphone. And it reminded me of something that I think is affecting our lives and our perception of the world today. Sometime between 10 and 15 years ago, something fundamentally changed with technology companies and the protocols on the internet. Even if younger people don't believe me, I promise you that this is real. I'm telling you the truth. There used to be a time when, no matter where you were on the planet Earth, every single Google user who typed in carrot cake recipe would get exactly the same results in exactly the same order, displayed exactly the same way on the page, right? Like that was normal. We had a common user experience, right? We saw the same world around us. I noticed all of a sudden that went away. All of a sudden, people started saying, there's no sound for me, right? It wasn't, this movie doesn't have an audio track. It was, well, for me, there's no sound. For me, I get these results. We all instantly adopted for me, and what it's extremely frustrating because I know it wasn't one conspiracy. I'm not saying that, but tech protocols changed in concert with each other and took away the ability for all of us to have a common experience and also complicated things so that we no longer understand what may be digitally going wrong that's causing us problems because we can't talk to other people because they're not seeing or hearing what we see. So this has happened with both. It's everything. It's audio and video. It's the actual content that search engines give back to you. It's two users can be doing business with the same audio video company, but if one is on an Apple operating system phone and another is on a PC operating system computer, they will be served entirely different information, organized differently. It's maddening. It's Tower of Babel stuff. And you brought up, Leslie, that it's this algorithmic way that we are being funneled.
Yeah. Did you see I think we talked about this on Solid Ground recently. So I don't want to retread old ground, but I think it's important for everybody to understand this as we are using the internet so much. There was recently some internet post that went a bit viral on Twitter in the past few months where a woman was seeing a social media feed, a video where another woman is complaining about her husband always getting home late from work.
Okay.
All of the comments that she read in the comments underneath of the video were in support of the woman's position against the man. So he's taking advantage of it. He needs to be more honest. He's whatever. So this is supporting this woman's video. Well, the woman who is posting about this is kind of meta now. So the woman who's posting about seeing this video shows it to her husband or boyfriend. He looks at the same video, and under the video for him is a bunch of men who are posting comments that are anti the woman's position. Oh, this woman is really riding her husband. She needs to loosen up and get her own life. And she just let the guy have some breathing room. So the really creepy thing was, like you said, we used to see all of the same things. If we Googled carrot cake recipe, we all see the same, like the most popular hits come up first, the most relevant or whatever, right?
For all of us in the same order.
Same order. So this lady and man who are looking at the same video, kind of War of the Sexes style, what the men say, what the women say, his men's comments not only load first as the first comments on the video, and her women's comments load first, but they couldn't even find the comments that each other were seeing when they scrolled all the way through the comments. Yeah, so you see this real manipulation of information, and this is something super trivial. This is just like somebody's mad at her
but
husband.
it isn't though. It isn't though. Because
yeah,
look at that. That's the actual right there.
Mhm.
You see in a very plain, very simple example,
Mhm.
exactly how people are being goaded to fight each other.
Yeah.
Because we are, and it's not just that. This has very big philosophical, I mean, real philosophy implications here. This is about human cognition and what society is and what perception is, right? We are humans. We have a neurology. It cannot be changed. We can't get a new chip. We can't update to the new Apple operating system. Humans do not work that way. We are biological creatures. We have a hardwired neurology. We are programmed, and we cannot change this programming. We are programmed to experience the world that we evolved in. And that world that we evolved in was a world in which it was not possible, unless you were a schizophrenic, right? It was not possible to see different things. You could not walk down the street and the two people would see entirely different things. That's what's going on in the digital world. We can't handle this. And oh, it's just so depressing.
It is depressing, and there's so many like perverse incentives involved in trying to change what we're seeing. I mean, on one hand, it's commercial. It's like you get, I remember when that started happening, Google got those the people who paid to have their website got elevated in the search history. So you'd see those first. And
Google made sure to make it very hard to tell that it was an ad.
They did. And I when that started, I developed this habit of always scrolling past the first few, because it was like, you guys are cheating. I'm not looking. I'm just scroll down. But who knows what that even does. But then there's also this whole idea of that there's this curation. Like, do you remember, what was it, a couple of years ago when people were posting all these search results? Like you try to search for family, then every single image result would be a Black family or a mixed race family.
Yes, that was within a year ago.
That was not that long ago. And it was, so there's this, it's kind of like the tech executives have become Aristotle's philosopher kings who have appointed themselves the moral arbiters of what we are all to be thinking and taking in. And so now we have this, like, it's maddening. Like, when does it end? How do we perceive reality in anything like an objective way if we're all getting our own feedback loop every time we open our computers?
We can't. The answer is we can't. That's the answer. How do we get out of it? I don't know, but we can't actually perceive objective reality. We've been prevented from doing that. At least I hope for so little these days. I really hope for little, but I at least hope that we can make people start to become aware of this. But what we do, I'm actually not very, I don't think it's going to work. I think people are just going to continue to accept it and live as if they're living in a normal world because it's too confrontational. It feels too big to them. They're not going to believe it's true because they can't handle it.
Yeah. And I wonder, Nina Paley the other day posted something. I think it was Nina who, she just posted this one line on Twitter. And so here I am online. This is funny. She says, "The future is offline." And I love that. I hope that's true. I don't know though. I wonder sometimes if these things, we can't put the genie back in the bottle, and here I am, citing something that's online while I'm recording something that's online that I'm going to put online with a guy that I met online.
I mean, are we, you and I, Leslie, are we actually talking to each other? Could we know?
Yeah. It just becomes Twilight Zone pretty soon.
Yeah.
But it does weird things to people. I mean, I've been wrestling with it for a while. I don't let my kids do screens at all. I raised my daughters, who are
So
now
good.
28 and 26, without a television in the house. We didn't have a TV. They didn't have computer. When they were in high school, we had a computer that they could do work on, but it stayed in the
Sure.
family room. It didn't go
Yes.
into their
There
room.
used to be a family computer, just like there used to be the household telephone, the
Yeah,
household television set, right? I
right,
mean, I
right.
remember, we're about the same age, I think. And I
Yeah.
remember, I don't know, I mean, I grew up poor, like really
Mhm.
poor.
Mhm.
Well, no, not really poor, USA poor.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I remember thinking how luxurious, almost profligate it was when I would go to friends' houses and see that other members of the family had a portable black and white television set in their
In their
bedroom
own
as a
room.
supplement
I
to the
know.
big one in the living room. I couldn't
Hmm.
believe it. I was like,
Hmm. That's
how
fancy.
decadent, you know?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
now everybody's, well, it's, you know what, Leslie, it's also this is the way we live technologically, the personalization. I hate that word. I hate it so much.
Mm.
It's been so abused. Personalization is a trap. I no longer believe, at least the way we use it these days. Um, there was a time within living memory when that was the big buzzword, personalization. You personalize your computer experience. You
Mm.
personalize your phone. You personalize, right? Okay, fine. So you're having every little whim of yours catered to, and that feels good, right?
Mhm.
But here's the other side of personalization. We have actually personalized the actual infrastructure that used to be common and public. So phones are an example. Um, I think about this when I'm driving.
Mhm.
When I see somebody at the side of the road with a broken down car, I live in Vermont, so most of the state is rural. Most of my driving is on two-lane roads. There's one major highway, and it's only two lanes. Okay, it's
Mhm.
only two
Little.
lanes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so most driving here is rural,
Hmm.
and I see people on the side of the road, and I think to myself, because I started driving in 1990, and the values that you carried as a driver, they're still sort of instinctive for me. So when I
Hmm.
see somebody, especially because we are a rural state and the winters can be really brutal, my first impulse is to pull over and see if they need help,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I don't, and I know, but see, everybody has a phone now, right?
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
assumption is that everybody has a phone. So you think to yourself, I'm sure they're fine, but there are going to be cases when they left their phone at home, or they're out of service,
Yeah.
right? And we don't think to help that. We don't know. I don't know how to negotiate these things.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think about what would happen when a couple of times when I got into trouble as a
Hmm.
kid, either I got lost, which didn't happen very often, but once in
Hmm.
a while you get lost because when
Hmm.
I was a
We
kid, you were
didn't have
still allowed
maps
to
on our
walk
phone.
down the street,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You were allowed to actually walk to the grocery store as a child.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, or you lost the money your mom gave you or something like
Hmm.
that, and you needed
Hmm.
to call home.
Yeah.
So we always walked around with a quarter for the
Hmm.
payphone.
Hmm.
There was always a payphone, and if you didn't have a quarter, you could call collect, reverse the charges.
Yep.
And if there was no payphone, and again, Gen Z, if you're listening, I promise you I'm telling the truth. The social rule was you knocked on somebody's door or you
Yeah.
stopped at a store
Yep.
and
Yep.
you said, Mister, may I please use your phone?
That
And
happened to my
99
family
out of
many
100
times.
people
Yeah.
invited you into their
Yep.
house and brought you to the telephone. It
That's
was
right.
normal.
It was.
Now that would be considered creepy
That
or
would freak
perhaps
people
an,
out.
an intrusion and a violation and something that people needed to be on alarm about.
Hmm.
That's not healthy. This is
Hmm.
not healthy. So if you don't have your phone, fuck you. You get lost in a foreign country, fuck you.
Right.
Right?
I
It's just
know.
like,
I know. And to think of somebody coming up to you and asking if they could use your phone. I mean, the
yes,
the thoughts that would have to go through your head in that moment, like, is he gonna just take it and run? Is he gonna,
exactly.
I don't know if I want to hand him my phone. You'd be really assessing the trustworthiness of this person, because now it's not just it's not just a telephone device.
It's
It's like
everything.
your bank. It's, it's your best friend. It's all the
It's your
messages.
diary.
It's pictures.
It's your best friend's secrets. It's your
Yeah.
secrets.
Yep.
It's everything. And
Yeah.
it's just and we go through this with businesses too. Um like I'll give you an example. I was just complaining about this on Twitter because that's always done so well for me in the past. That's why I continue to do it. I'm trying to pay my Comcast internet bill, right?
Mm.
Just like I do every month. I go and log on to their website. I click on pay.
Mhm.
Guess what? Comcast has disabled their website where you used to pay, and they give you a notice. We're sorry, we've sunsetted
Oh
this
gosh.
payment system.
Oh.
Please download our app.
It's an app
No,
now. Oh my gosh.
no, I will
No.
not sit here on my actual desktop computer
Yeah.
and download your application to pay my bill.
Right.
But they do it and they're getting away with it.
Oh, that's so frustrating. And I want to talk about that
Let me
recent.
stop. Yeah, stop me from hijacking
No,
this entire.
it's so relevant. This is just such a part of our common frustration. And I'm thinking about, what was it before? It was like your phone was a public utility, something. It was through Southwestern
Common
Bell,
carrier.
or yeah. And we're all kind of, I don't know about you, but I've been in this sort of libertarian mindset, at least for the past several years, where I'm
Yep.
like really in favor of reduction of the size of our bureaucratic state. and
Yes.
and so it sort of sounds a little counterintuitive that I'm pining for the old days of government run phones,
I
but
know.
but I
I
feel
know.
like the tech thing is not, it's a false sense of market diversity. It's really like just one giant monopoly that's a big handshake behind the scenes to gouge us. We're paying, how much did your phone bill used to cost? I think it was like $20 a month or something. And now my cell phone alone is like $100. My husband's is
I know.
another, whatever. So
This is, somebody brought this up. Somebody left this comment on one of my shows
mhm.
recently. Um, it's it's true. Nothing has really changed. Okay, so you remember when we were kids, um, phones were copper copper wire landlines.
Yeah,
When I was little, that was just the end of the era in which phones were hardwired into your wall.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bell sent a lineman out to your home to
Hmm.
hardwire the
Yeah.
unit into your electrical system. You couldn't just plug it in. It was
Hmm.
property of Bell Telephone.
Right.
Okay, fine. All those problems. Fine, fine, fine.
Yeah.
Telephone calls were reliable. They were
Hmm.
crystal clear.
Oh, the
There was
audio was
no
so
such thing.
good.
There was no such thing as can you hear me now? That never
Right.
existed before 20 years ago.
No.
People, especially young people, they literally don't know. They literally do not understand that we actually did have technology that made audible phone calls easy to listen to.
Yeah.
The quality has gone to absolute shit. But we're told that we have a commensurate recompense, right? Well,
Yeah.
you lost your audio quality, but look at all the other things you can do, whether we want to do those things or not, whether those are high priority or not.
Mm.
And you remember the old Lily Tomlin telephone operator comedy routine?
Vaguely, vaguely. Yeah.
Remember? Chris, good afternoon. This is Miss Tomlin at your telephone company. She would do this telephone operator in front of a
Uh-huh.
switchboard. And the whole shtick was that she was a Bell employee, Ernestine, the phone operator. And she was reveling in the fact that Bell had a monopoly. And she would say lines like, you know, we're the telephone company. We don't have to care. Right? It's the same thing now.
Yeah.
They broke up the Bell monopoly and everything went to shit.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it totally did. And what, that thing about the clarity, I can remember some of the early phone calls that I made, because I didn't get a cell phone. I mean, early cell phone calls that I made. I didn't get a cell phone till I must have been 23, 24 years old. That would have been like around the year 2000, around
About
that
the
year.
same time for me.
Okay. And I was not an early adopter. I wasn't super late either. It was just, that's when I got a cell phone. And I remember I spent a lot of time on wireless telephones before that.
Mhm.
My
Yes,
landline,
yeah.
they were
The
wireless.
portable,
Yeah.
yeah, the portable handset in the house. Yeah.
And that was already a little bit of a degradation of what our old handsets or our old, wired phones were.
Yep.
But then when I first got a cell phone, I can remember the feeling like there was like this small bit of tension that stayed in the call the whole time because there's this
Yes.
little bit of,
Delay.
uncertainty about the connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
A little bit of uncertainty about the
Uh-huh.
connection.
Uh-huh.
Less inconsistent line noise,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And line noise, for those who don't know, is just simply the hum or the tone. It could be very, very subtle that you
Yeah.
hear when you're connected to an open circuit,
Yep.
right? It's the right?
Yep.
But it's what filmmakers, it's similar to what filmmakers call room tone.
Okay.
When you're shooting a scene in a movie and you're shooting dialogue and actors,
Mm.
when that's done, you make everybody be quiet and then you open up the microphone for the soundtrack and you record just the sound of the room. It's
Okay.
silence, but it isn't silent
Oh, interesting.
because
I didn't know
every
that.
room that you're in, like you see this wood behind me,
Uh-huh.
makes a different noise than if that were all hard sheetrock. It would be a much
Or windows
brighter,
or
brassier noise if it were hard walls, right? So
mm.
and you think this doesn't matter, but there's a reason they go to the trouble of recording room tones because you feel something is weird and wrong if you don't hear it.
That's
That's
interesting.
what they took away. That's what this technology took away also
Mm.
when we went away from wired phones. Plus, there is sometimes an inconsistent delay
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
microseconds, but it injects tension into the conversation because you don't know if you're stepping on someone else speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even more so with these video conference um, things. On the one hand, it's so cool that I can be in Washington State talking with someone in Vermont and we can look
Yeah.
at each other as we talk. I mean, that's I
Yeah,
I
it's Star
I don't
Trek.
want to dismiss how cool that is. Yeah, it's amazing. It's the connection is cool, but on the other hand, the conversation it would be very different if we were sitting in a room together.
Yes.
There'd be a
And
very different
actually,
feeling.
I'll give Zoom some credit here. Zoom is the least laggy platform of its type that I have used.
Hmm.
There's almost no delay here, so
Hmm.
good job, Zoom.
Yeah.
But it's apparently hard to make that happen because a lot of platforms have trouble making that happen.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's hard for me sometimes to not be black and white about these things. I want to I'm a bit of a Luddite and I'm a bit of like an old curmudgeon at this point. Like the you don't know how
Kerosene,
good we had it. That's
right?
awesome.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, Luddite.
Yeah. So you're living in a cabin out in the country now.
Oh,
Is that right?
you make it sound much, much more charming than it really is. Uh,
It looks very charming.
yeah, well, it is. It'll be more charming when I get done. It's the this is a house. It's just a ranch style
Hmm.
split level upstairs, downstairs.
Okay.
I have tenants upstairs. I live in the downstairs apartment. But yeah, it's in the country on a dirt road.
Uh-huh.
And
Wow.
it's fairly silent out here,
That's
and
cool.
it's nice. Yeah.
That's amazing. Were you born and raised in Vermont?
No, upstate New York. So born and raised in the Northeast,
Northeast?
with 5 years in Southern California when I was a
Oh.
kid.
Oh, when you
But
were like a minor still or
yeah,
young teen?
we I lived in Orange County, California from 1979 to 1984. So
Okay.
that was between the time I was 5 and 10 years old.
All right. Wow, that's such a change, it seems like. I've never been to Vermont and I've never been to upstate New York. I've been to New York City a couple of times, but I can't imagine what a difference that must have been for you going to Southern California and back. Must
Big
have felt like a
difference.
different world, especially
Yeah,
back then,
much
because
more urban. Yeah, upstate New York, and I mean, there are variations. The Northeast, so there's levels of culture. There is a
hmm.
Northeast culture.
Hmm.
Like buildings, homes, and things look sort of pretty much the same no matter where you go.
Hmm.
Vermont is very Victorian New England, whereas upstate New York is more modest and farmhouse
Hmm.
style.
Hmm.
There's little variations, but the Northeast is the Northeast culturally
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. So yeah, California was different, but I mean, I only saw it through the eyes of a child.
Kid.
And I'm sure it's very different now, but I thought it was pretty cool back
Mhm.
then. Not now. I wouldn't live in California for love nor money now.
Yeah, it's
And you're in
madness
Washington
politically.
State.
Hmm.
Are you suburban or are you right in the middle of a city?
I guess we're more suburban. We live in a smallish town that's pretty rural, outside of, it's about 45 minutes to an hour from Seattle, northeast, in
Okay.
the kind of in the foothills of the Cascade Mountain Range. It's a beautiful area. It's really lovely. And I'm in Snohomish County, which is it's politically more mixed. It's not what you hear about King County, where Seattle is.
Yeah.
It's what you picture that being. Um, so it's a nice place. I do you remember, and I imagine it was like this when you were a kid, coming from California and back to the Northeast. Something I remember from being a kid was how different places felt. We would drive to Kentucky because
Yes.
I'm from South Texas, and we would drive
Yes.
up to Kentucky to see family. We went to Missouri once. We just would take these long road trips when I was a kid, and we didn't have this monoculture where everything has a TGI Fridays and a mattress firm. It was every place had its own
Placeness.
styles and yeah, placeness. Yeah, that's a great word.
Yes. Yes. I don't. Yeah, I think we're sharing a brain the past couple weeks because that's been on my mind too. I was thinking
Really?
that myself when I was out on the highway looking at the few the for now
Hmm.
few places in Vermont that have become suburban shopping centers
Hmm.
that look like anywhere America.
Anywhere.
We don't have very many of them, but they are growing,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Hmm.
No, the world did not look like that. It didn't
Hmm.
look like, you know what? Yesterday, I was thinking about it in terms of time because I was contemplating this while I was on a 45-minute drive, and I was thinking about what 1984 felt like in Southern California.
Hmm.
Um, that I don't know how to put it into words,
Hmm.
but there is a sense of what a time and place felt like. It felt
Hmm.
like I know what the 1980s feel like. I
Hmm.
know what the 1990s feel like.
Hmm.
Um, I know what today feels like, and it's not very nice.
Hmm.
But it was a whole different feeling. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think that's really, I I get that. I think so too. I have a lot of nostalgia for
Me
times
too.
that I remember, and maybe I idealize and sort of turn them into a bit of a filtered image in my mind, but still
Yeah.
it has something. There's something to it. I remember just growing up, I lived in San Antonio, and just driving through Austin, which is only about an hour and a half away, felt like you were in a completely different place.
Yep.
Just one city away. So cool.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I guess when we are around 50 years old, we
Hmm.
can start to be the old fogies who have reminiscences about the old days.
I live in nostalgia.
Hmm.
Um, I give up. I just live in nostalgia. I don't even feel bad about it anymore. Um, you're like, no, you can't just live in the past. Yes, I can. Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I'm sorry, but I just, well, anyway, yeah, that's how it
yeah,
gets when you're about 50. That's how it
yeah,
gets.
yeah. And this kind of goes back as sort of a non sequitur meandering conversation we're having. But I was listening to the conversation that you and Kevin did the other day on your podcast about
Yes,
his difficulty with an Apple computer and the customer
yes.
service. And oh man, it was really frustrating. I had this vicarious frustration, and also I've been in similar situations, and it's so maddening when you hit a brick wall. And when you were talking about like unconscionable contracts and how much things have sort of flattened out for us in certain ways and boxed us in other ways.
Yes.
It was refreshing in a way to hear somebody complaining about it, because these are the kinds of experiences that we have over and over in modern life,
Yes.
and we sort of feel them, we go into them, and then we have to just set it aside and keep moving along. And they are they're intricate, they're crazy making, and nobody wants to hear about it. So we're not going to sit down and tell all of our friends about it so that we can process what just happened. Plus, they have their own stories.
I wish we would.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly wish we would, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and maybe I'm looking at the past I'm sure that to some degree I'm looking at the past romantically. I'm sure it's not entirely accurate, given.
Mm-hmm.
But I seem to remember a time when if you went out to lunch with a group of friends
Mm-hmm.
and you got ripped off at the muffler repair shop
Mm-hmm.
or the oil change place, and you said, you know, I brought my car in last week and they changed the oil, but they didn't put the plug back in, so all the new oil dripped out and my engine seized and blah, blah, like something like that, right?
Yeah.
You'd say, don't ever go to that Jiffy Lube. We would share these sorts of things with our friends, but
Mm-hmm.
now, and maybe it's me, but my perception is like, you know, we did a whole half-hour segment on that problem with Apple Computer on the show because I wanted to have that conversation. But my perception is that outside of limited context like that on my show, that even people who have had the same frustrations, we've internalized that this is more melodramatic than I mean. I just don't know a better way to express it. So take it and then dial the emotion back a little bit. We have internalized the logic of our oppressors, so to speak, right? I don't want to make a victim narrative here, but I do want to highlight power differentials. Tech companies have all the power. We have none. We have absolutely none. We don't even have customer power anymore. We don't. People think, well, just go. No, we can't just go somewhere else when they all agree to do the same tricks. And they do all agree to do the same tricks. We have been fractured. Like I'll take last week's show in the Apple segment as an example. To my frustration, many of my viewers, not all of them, but not just two either, many left comments siding with Apple and saying, but you knew this when you signed the contract, or they disclosed it when they signed the contract, or but you have to understand, Apple has a responsibility for security. So Apple has these needs and you have to da 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 da. What frustrated me about it wasn't that they disagreed. That's an accusation. I get this accusation a lot. I see other people get it too. You can't tolerate disagreement. No, it isn't that. It's not the fact of your disagreement that upsets me. What upsets me is you have these viewers, I don't think actually took in my argument. What I was saying, and I guess I'm going to have to repeat it this week to remind people and go slower. What I was saying is I acknowledge that this was in the contract. I acknowledge that they told Kevin this. I acknowledge this. I acknowledge this. What I'm saying is that's all illegitimate. That the contract itself, the terms of the contract itself are abusive. So this is not a valid, it should not be a legally enforceable contract, because what you are saying, viewer who is agreeing with Apple, is it's okay to screw me if I told you I was going to screw you. That's not how the courts actually evaluate contracts. I'm afraid that's just not how it is, right? If you can get in front of a court and argue that you have a fundamentally unfair or unconscionable contract, courts rule this way. They don't always rule in favor of the customer. But in legal jurisprudence, yes, we do recognize the concept of invalid on its face because its basic terms are abusive, right? The viewers couldn't, not all of them. The viewers who disagreed, I don't think they took that in because I'm like, did you hear what I said? So what bothers me about that is the acquiescence and the internalization that we all do, where we side with the unfair player just because he's the big unfair player.
Yeah, and it's also that siding with the paternalistic company. I mean, this company is being it's like this parentification, like, well, it might be lost or stolen, so we have to treat everybody like like
Right.
it's lost or stolen because we have to protect your blah blah
We
blah.
have to be fair to everyone. And if that means that you all lose recess, that's how it is.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
this is the relationship we now have with companies. Are we even customers anymore? We're paying them, and
yeah,
yet they're our mom and dad.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really?
And in
Why
this
is that so
situation,
normal to so many people?
yeah, I wonder that too. I wonder that too. It's
Why do
you
you
should
like
have more
this?
freedom. Yeah, like it's my computer. I should be able to wipe
Yeah,
it if I want
I
to.
actually, yeah, it is mine.
I'm not asking you for the keys to this person's Apple ID. I'm just asking
Right.
you if I can reformat the hardware that I have
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, and if anybody
Yeah,
wants the backstory to this, go look at Disaffected from last week.
yeah.
We've got the entire audio from the customer service phone call with Apple. It will amaze you. Even if you're listening right now and you're predisposed to be against my position, I get it, but please just take a listen to it. I think even you would be frustrated.
It is just it was kind of like I said, it's kind of vicariously frustrating and maddening, but it's also refreshing to hear somebody going over a one of our really common modern frustrations, problems that we're having.
Think about how
And
much time it eats up from us. Think about how much time these things eat out of our like of all the problems I could be solving, this is the last one I would want to spend 45 minutes on, you know? But
hmm. Yeah, this is why I miss conversations with my mother. We used to be able to
yeah,
have these kinds of long conversations about just whatever it was. Yeah.
yeah.
What are the issues that have been really on your mind lately besides nostalgia?
Well, I'm sure the same issues that are on the minds of most people, the election, the state of our society, the state of our media and what passes for our shared culture. It's very grim to me.
Yeah.
What about for you?
Some of the same things. I mean, the it's interesting as the election comes near, and we're talking on November 1st right now. I probably will put this out next week, so we
Yep.
might be the day after
Might
the
even be the day
election.
after, right?
Yeah, I might put it up on Wednesday actually.
Yeah, it'll
Um,
be interesting. See how badly wrong we went, or
yeah, this
you
will
know.
sit as a time capsule.
Yep.
Um, I I find myself really biased here. I'm not sitting in the center. I'm not radically centered in this election. I'm for I would like to see Trump win
Me
this.
too.
I don't I think that the Democrats look really sleazy and slimy to me.
Yeah.
And I'm also trying not to be very extreme about my feelings so that I'm prepared for whatever happens, whether my team wins or not. I want to be balanced in how I
Yes.
respond to this and sympathetic towards the people who are going to be really frustrated. It's become really existential for a lot of people, I think.
Yes. Uh, it's this is difficult for me to know. I've been trying not to have any hope, and I've been trying to make a minimal emotional investment,
Mhm.
but I'm only very partially successful with that because I am emotionally invested in
Mhm.
these issues, no
Mhm.
doubt, very, very deeply. Um, but and it's hard because well, let's talk in black and white. People aren't black and white, but we have to be able to talk about yes and no and binary things. So people on both sides of the political spectrum right now are nervous and fearful about what will come.
Mhm.
I know that that's true. And I know that they would say their version of the exact thing that I'm about to say. I know that. Nevertheless, Nevertheless, I believe the left is factually and ethically in the wrong right now.
Mhm.
It's not both sides. It's not just, well, I feel that way and you feel that way. And I know they're saying exactly the same thing about you and me right now. I get it. And I
Mhm.
get that they're being honest that that's what they believe. But they're not correct. The Democrat Party is extraordinarily dangerous And I don't want to over egg this either, because every election cycle we hear that it's the most important election ever. So I don't want to participate in that, but I am genuinely fearful that if the Democrats win, that we literally will have that that will be the beginning of the end of our constitutional republic. I do think it's that dire. And I know that the people who hate Trump think the same thing in reverse. And it frustrates me. I don't think most of them are evil. I think they're profoundly misinformed and profoundly misguided. I used to be one of those people. You know, we've talked about that before. I was a hardcore leftist. So I having had the experience of being on both sides of the aisle, I understand that my leftist counterparts are human beings just like I am. And they're not all evil. I don't mean to say that, but they are so profoundly misguided that I fear them. I fear them.
Well, that's a lot nicer than calling them garbage, which is the trope that's going around the other direction.
It's the most disheartening. I expect the insults. I expect the lies from the politicians, especially the Democrats. I'm not personally, my personal Josh feelings weren't hurt by Joe Biden calling us garbage, right? I find it obnoxious. I think it's outrageous. And as a citizen, I believe it's completely unacceptable.
It's unethical.
And frankly, should be an impeachable offense. Yes, I do mean that. I do mean that. I'm not saying it for rhetorical effect.
Yeah,
yes.
I agree. If you can't, if you're going to slander half the population of the country,
It's
you're
completely
purporting to
unacceptable.
leave. Yeah.
A healthy society would have risen up en masse, Republican and Democrat, and said, "How dare you, sir? You step down right now, or we will step you down for you." We would have drawn a boundary and a line in the sand that said, that is so beyond the acceptable pale. You are now disqualified from positions of power. That is what a healthy society would have done, whether Joe was a Republican or a Democrat. We did not do that because we're not a healthy or sane society. The most disheartening part was seeing all of it, the entire media apparatus immediately lie to us and tell us that we did not hear what we all heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do we do?
I know. It's really crazy. The last time I felt this sense of, I guess, political urgency was when the tables were turned. It was the Republicans around the Iraq War, George W. Bush,
Yes.
the Halliburton, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, all of this stuff.
Cheney's now a hero of the Democrats.
I know, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
So for me, it's like I don't believe in these parties at all. I think that these are just political patterns that keep perpetuating themselves. And right now that pattern is really strong in the Democrats. And so that's it's not enough to make me switch teams, if you will, because I can foresee a future when the pattern shifts and it's more heavily skewed on the other side. So I'm anti whoever's doing that authoritarian complete gaslighting of the American public.
Same. I didn't, I'm no longer a Democrat, but I didn't go and register with the Republican Party. I didn't go register with the Libertarian Party. I'm not registering with any parties. I'm not joining any clubs. Everything is a la carte and ad hoc for me from here on forward. I don't care. I don't care what letter you have after your name. I want to see the substance of your policy. And if it's sane, I'm with you. If it's insane, I'm against you.
And the same for credentialism. What letters you have after your name? I feel the same way.
They mean nothing anymore. Well, I don't know. For me, I know I'm not the only one. It's more than they don't mean anything. For me, the letters after a name, that is a red flag to me now. It begins my distrust filtering process. If I see Masters of Public Health after your name, you're not getting anywhere near me. We're not friends. I'm not going to give you a first chance or a second chance. No, you don't. I have nothing to do with you.
Instant distrust.
instant distrust. And it's also rational because almost everybody that we have ever noticed who has MPH after their names, or frankly, MD after their names, or PhD after their names, has been an enemy of American freedom and sovereignty. I will have nothing to do with you people.
Yeah, I mean, it's an understandable backlash to what we've seen with over sort of manipulation of people via the appeal to authority fallacy.
It's where, it's if you think of it in economic terms, culture, you can view culture through an economic perspective. I'm not, I'm sure there's an economics term for this phenomenon. I don't know what it is, but what is take Harvard as an example. Let Harvard stand in as the symbol in this conversation for universally accepted institution of higher learning that has proven itself to be a trustworthy brand, right? I understand it's different now, but accept that as a stand-in, right? Because that was true for a long time. The Harvards of the world had earned a reputation, at least with some legitimacy, right? There was something real there.
Yeah.
There is not now. But what the people who are haunting the Ivy League halls these days, what they're getting away with, they are spending on a cultural credit card. They're spending they're spending cultural capital that was earned legitimately in the past, but that is not being produced now. So there is a finite amount of that capital. The credit card has a $12,000 limit. You can't go higher than 12,000. They've almost spent, they may have spent all of it, but there's a lag between, there's an abundance of prestige or cultural influence that these institutions have that they can coast on for a while, even when they're starting to turn against their own original mission. I hope that we've gotten to the end. I hope the credit card is running out for the Harvards and the CDCs and every other respectable institution, because these people are still getting away with it because about half the country still believes these are respectable institutions. Like, half the country knows they're not, but what will it take to get a majority of the country to understand that? That's what I'm interested in.
It's a really good metaphor. I haven't heard that before. Is that something that you thought up? I like that. The cultural.
I'm
The
sure
credit
other
card.
people have thought of it similarly, but that's the best way I know how to explain
It
it.
makes a lot of sense. It's interesting to me how much I guess I'm trying to think of what are the central things that people seem to be trying to regulate about each other. It's like there's the medical thing. This has become your health is everybody else's business,
Yep.
which is one of the things that really scares me about socialized medicine.
Medicine.
It's like we see the death panels or the maid service in Canada,
Yep.
and we have
We made fun
euthanasia.
of Sarah. I made fun of Sarah Palin for talking about death panels. I mocked her. I called
Oh,
her
yeah.
stupid.
And
I
now
called her
it's,
a bimbo.
yeah,
And I was the asshole. I was the blind asshole because that's what we have now.
yeah. Well, and you can just see it. I mean, like as soon as your health spending is everybody else's concern, then the extending your life when it is deemed pointless to do so becomes a matter of pressure. And think about how many people would just accept that pressure and say, okay, you're right. And just, who's going to lay there allowing people to continue to take care of them when the people around them are saying, we don't want to take care of you anymore?
We've already
It's,
seen it happen. It's already happened many, many times.
Mhm.
We've seen the quotes from people who've availed themselves of what Canada calls MAID, which is a horrendously abusive euphemism, medical assistance in dying, or death, whatever they want to call it, death with dignity.
Yeah.
I used to support this too. I used to be an assisted suicide proponent. I was wrong.
Mhm.
That we've seen people say, I don't want to be a burden to my family. I don't want to spend my
Right.
children's inheritance. We've seen
Right.
people consent to being killed.
Mhm.
It has already happened. It is happening.
Yeah, there was a case that there were a couple of cases. This, and I don't know. This is such a dark topic, but I really feel like this is something that's coming. So thinking
Yes.
about the things that have been on my mind lately, this is one of them. Sexual morality is another one of them, because I think we don't have a cultural consensus on what that is. And I think that's causing a lot of confusion and difficulty in the culture. But with MAID, we've seen cases where people's parents are this man in Canada, his father was repeatedly approached by the MAID team after they told him, no, we're not interested. No, we're not interested.
Yeah.
Finally, they came in when he was alone, got his consent because his family wasn't there to do it. And then the kids come back and dad has already signed off. He's going to do it. So you see stuff like this where people are harangued by these teams in order to free up their bed. And when it comes down to it, what part of a person's life is meaningful and what part is meaningless? If you're going to start to split it up mechanistically, at what point is your life more meaningful than any other point? I have to say that if you look at it from a mechanistic standpoint, well, what, none of it? Life is pretty inefficient. It's either spiritually important in every second that you're alive because you're here and you're a miracle, or really, what is it? I mean, just the reproductive capacity? Is that the only thing to make more life? Because but what are you making more life for
what
if life
is it?
isn't
What
important?
is it that we're protecting? What is it that we're valuing? That is the question, Leslie.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I'm re-examining. Let me tell you an anecdote that can frame this, and I bet you there are a lot of other people out there who have had this experience. I'm reevaluating what I think about this. I don't know if I believe what I believed when this happened. A good friend of mine, Michael, died in 2010, at 57 of liver cancer, which really was secondary to long-term AIDS.
Okay.
And it was probably a combination of both AIDS itself and also the brutal drug regimen that suppressed it. So, as most people know, liver cancer is almost never survivable. You're almost guaranteed to die. So we knew he was going to die, and it took the usual course, and it was an ugly cancer death. And at the end, when he was in the hospital, on palliative care, right? He was an 80-pound ambulatory skeleton.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
and
poor Michael.
it was horrendous. And he was in extraordinary pain, and he was yelling and crying.
Oh, wow.
And many people have seen this, right? What we did is what goes on all the time. We, and by we I mean family and friends, talked with the nursing team and said, please keep him comfortable, give him as much morphine as he needs not to be in writhing pain, no matter what happens, right? Knowing that might kill him.
It might kill him, yeah.
And in fact, I pulled the nurses aside and had a private talk with them, because others in the family, I think, believed this, but would not have been comfortable saying it. I don't know whether I did right or wrong. I thought I was doing right. I hope I was, but maybe I did wrong. But I pulled him aside and I said, listen, and I know that he is nothing but a skeleton in pain right now. There's no coming back from this. Every moment he's conscious, he hurts. This is pointless and it's cruel. Will you please push morphine overnight? Will you push enough, please? Nobody said anything explicitly, but we all know what was being discussed, and that is what happened. And he died the next morning. That's technically medically assisted suicide. Sort of, maybe. I don't know. It's these. What do you do with something like that? What's the difference? Is there a difference between that scenario, which many people listening have been in that scenario, What's the difference between that and what's going on now? Was that itself wrong? Was that a step too far? That's the kind of stuff I think about.
That's a really, I mean, there's so much about these scenarios that presents difficulty, and it's very complicated. I had a medical emergency a couple of years ago. I guess it's 2.5 years ago now. I was my ovary twisted in my fallopian
Oh,
tube. Yes.
oh, Leslie. Oh, that
Yeah,
must have been terrible. I'm
it
sorry.
was so terrible. It was ovarian torsion.
Oh,
I've heard it's testicular torsion is a similar thing. Yeah. It's
I'm feeling you.
you feel it. Yeah. It was so bad. And I have 4 children. I've had 3 of them without drugs.
Yeah.
And this was like being in the heights of labor pain. It was so, and so to me, when I've tried to describe childbirth before to people who haven't had babies, it's like it's the most pain you can be in and not be dying. Like there's nothing wrong. It's amazing that there's nothing wrong with your body and you can be in that much pain. It
Yeah.
hurts so much. And
Oh,
so I was in the hospital for, I guess I got there around like 8 o'clock, and they didn't do my surgery until 3:30. And during that time, and we could have a whole conversation just about how bad that experience was because of the medical staff and the flat malpractice, I would say, that doctor perpetrated. It was horrible. And I think you'd be down for that conversation, but I don't want to
yeah.
derail us with it. But it at one point, well, they had me on morphine and fentanyl,
Okay.
and they couldn't suppress the pain because it was still
Good God.
so bad. My respiration and heart rate were extremely low, and there was a woman in there trying to coach me to breathe because they were afraid that I was just going to blink out. So what I'm saying is that in that case, if I had had something that I was not going to recover from, and someone had chosen to prioritize making me comfortable over extending my life, then I don't see that as an assisted suicide. I see that as a difficulty of prioritization. And so what happened with your friend, you didn't say, let's end his life. You said, he is so uncomfortable right now. He is in so much misery that I want you to prioritize getting him comfortable, even though I know that'll mean ending his life. It was like the ending his life was a byproduct of what you wanted for him, which was an ease to his pain.
Yes, I think this is what the Catholics call the doctrine of double effect. Am I
Okay. I don't know.
um I'm probably not using the right terminology, but there is a Catholic line of thought that it's often invoked in terms of abortion. So
Mm,
if there is an ectopic pregnancy or
mm,
another kind of pregnancy that is almost certain to be fatal to the
right.
mother, um, it is acceptable to save her life, even if that results in the fetus or the baby dying, because the intent was not to abort or kill the baby or fetus.
Right.
The intent was to save the mother's life. And of course, you try to save both lives, but when you
Hmm.
have to make a choice, you make a choice. And I think I agree with that, but I also then question myself and say, well, you have an interest in agreeing with that because it salves your conscience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I question.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what makes an ethical conundrum, right? Is that it's not clear. It's not obvious, just
No.
plainly, this is what you do. And so that's where policy becomes a strange thing to introduce into tricky, squishy, nuanced human circumstances.
I think in circumstances like this, we can talk. Um, I think we have to accept imperfection a lot more than we do.
Mm,
This goes back to what you were talking about what is it that we're trying to regulate? I think we have gone into fantasy land, and I think we believe that we can and that we should strive to regulate things that we cannot actually regulate without introducing worse problems. I think this is one of them.
mm,
Assisted suicide. I think it must be forbidden for a doctor or professional to administer, actively administer medication. Maybe other things need to be prohibited too. I would want to be sitting in a room full of very intelligent, very morally motivated people of different opinions and hear them all before I came up with a solution. But I believe it has I think what has to happen, I think we have to accept the messiness of this. We have to go back to the situation as it has been for a long time, which I went through with Michael, which is that you have private conversations and people who care and who are directly involved and who are in the family have private, moral, and ethical conversations out of public view, and make private decisions. No, I don't mean they can make the private decision to simply kill somebody because they want their money or they don't want to pay for their care anymore. I don't mean that. And no, I don't know how to protect against these gray areas. I'm telling you, I don't know. It's an extant problem. I recognize that.
Yeah.
But I think what happened in that hospital room, that private conversation, was a better way of doing things than what we have now.
I think so too. And I think a lot of what we're doing right now is sort of trying to make up for an absence of moral and spiritual ground by creating more legislative and mechanistic
Yes.
boundaries around things. And so
We're trying to outsource our own ethical duty, our job duties, our human job duties. We're trying to outsource them to a system.
Do you know the old version of the Hippocratic Oath? I just saw
I'm not
this
sure.
a couple months ago. The whole thing is quite long, but the relevant passage, Jennifer Law actually pointed this out to me. The original, nor shall any man's entreaty prevail upon me to administer poison to anyone, neither will I counsel any man to do so. Moreover, I will give no sort of medicine to any pregnant woman with a view to destroy the child. That was in the Hippocratic Oath. And so
I had no idea.
The more modern translation, if I will give no deadly medicine to anyone if asked, nor suggest any such counsel. And in like manner, I will not give to a woman a pessary to produce abortion. So those are two different, I guess.
Right. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Translations. Yeah. Interesting.
This came up. This has been in the news recently, of course, with the woman named Patience Frazier from Nebraska.
Okay. I haven't heard this.
This is a story that many people may have seen in the Washington Post, may have seen the New York Times writer Nicholas Kristof tweet about it. It has been presented to us by the mainstream media as a woman who had a miscarriage and who was then arrested and convicted of manslaughter. Okay. So the narrative is the evil misogynist Republicans really did show up as stormtroopers and arrest a woman because she innocently lost her baby because they hate women.
Double victimization.
Yeah, she's been victimed, right? What actually happened was that this woman who has 2 or 3 living children already. So contemplate their fate, listeners, when you hear this story. This happened. First of all, it's being presented to us as a consequence of the fall of Roe versus Wade. Now, Roe versus Wade was overturned in 2022. This woman was arrested in 2018.
Oh, so this is an old case. Okay.
No, she was arrested later, but what happened occurred in 2018. Roe versus Wade was in effect when this occurred. Okay. So this is it's not related. An example of what the fall of Roe v. Wade did. But people, the liberals are all believing it because they want to hear that. They want to hear that. What she actually did, she found, she's white trash. She's drug addicted, prostitute, white trash. She's a piece of shit, and her children should be taken away from her. She didn't like that she was pregnant. She couldn't get herself a couple hours away to an abortion clinic. So she decided to smoke meth and to take ounces and ounces of cinnamon because she learned online that these chemicals could cause her to have a miscarriage.
So she
killed her fucking baby.
Okay.
And got the miscarriage she wanted,
Hmm.
gave birth to the baby, and buried it in the backyard.
Oh, wow. So it must have been
Now,
far along. She must have been fairly far
I
along.
don't recall how far along it was, but it was long enough that we're not talking about a mass of undifferentiated bloody tissue.
Right, right.
Okay.
Hmm.
Now, it's not that I don't or that I can't feel any empathy or any sympathy for somebody in that situation who is
Hmm.
scared and has no stable man, no father in the house, doesn't know
Hmm.
where money is coming from. I get all that. But those things all happen as a result of this woman's own choices.
Hmm.
She got pregnant. I don't want to hear this anymore. I really don't. I'm sorry. I don't care anymore. I don't want to hear, oh, but if I don't have any choices, I can't control my reproductive rights. Yes, you do have choices.
Hmm.
You have choices to, first of all, not be promiscuous.
Hmm.
You have the choice, you can choose to wait until you're married and in a stable relationship before you have children. You can choose to use contraception and birth control. You have all sorts of choices.
Hmm.
This woman made these choices. She was not victimed into this position. She put herself in this
Hmm.
position. Nobody did anything to her. And well, it's of a piece, of course. We've talked about this many times. It's of a piece with the turn away from personal responsibility and the assigning of a boogeyman status to an outside person or an outside force.
Hmm. Well, and it's being used rhetorically to mean something that it doesn't mean.
Yeah. It's similar. I don't remember the detail. There was a case that came up maybe a month prior to this. Another young woman who, oh, she died. She died because she hemorrhaged, and she hemorrhaged because she took one of the abortifacient pills. I don't remember
Okay.
which one it was.
Okay.
Um, and an unusual but known side effect of this was internal hemorrhaging. So
Hmm.
this was a known side effect of this drug. And I don't remember why, for whatever reason, she didn't or couldn't get to a hospital in
Okay.
time. Um, and she died. And this
So,
whole thing has been presented as the Republicans killed her by making abortion illegal in her state. So she had to get illegal abortion pills. She had to do this to herself.
wow.
And she couldn't get any help. They forced her to die. Blah, blah. I mean, it's just,
It's like a bad faith actor can argue anything to
yeah.
to suit their own rhetorical purposes. That's almost incoherent to make that. It seems like that's a message about the dangers of some of these medications, but you want to make it
Yeah,
about
it is
policy.
a danger about
Yeah.
these medications. But and this highlights to people, I didn't understand this, Leslie. I used to be completely I didn't want any limits on abortion. I was pro-choice, frankly, I was pro-abortion. Let's just be honest.
Mhm.
I don't know where I am now. I I may well be wrong, and if I find that I'm morally wrong, I will own that later and revise what I'm saying now. Because I certainly have changed my mind about a lot of fundamental things. But right now, my honest position on this is I can't tell you that I believe a 2 month old fetus has the same personhood and moral worth as a 9 month old fetus.
Mhm.
People may disagree. People listening right now may vehemently disagree, and they may indeed be right. They may be
Mhm.
more moral on this than I am. I
Mhm.
absolutely allow that for a possibility. I'm simply explaining my thought process.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know how to reconcile this. I can see the evil of late term abortion. I don't feel the same way about a two month fetus. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but that's where I am right now.
Mhm.
But the bloodthirstiness that is now behind the way abortion is talked about has left me. I'm much closer than I've ever been to being against abortion wholesale,
Mhm.
than I ever have been before, because I see now the things that The things that people like me were told were lies and abuses by Republicans and anti-choice people, many of the things they were saying were actually correct.
Mhm.
What I used to say, it's completely absurd to require a woman to visit a doctor to get the abortion pill, blah blah blah. But and like the only reason that they're making you have to do it in a clinic is to make it inconvenient so women won't do it. Well, perhaps that was part of the motivation, sure. But it was also actually, we can see now, factually true that you should be under medical supervision if you're taking a drug like this. There was a reason for this.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that when you were talking about Michael's passing and you were talking about how that conversation among people who are directly involved in someone's life and care in a moment when a person is in need of individualized options, treatment, consideration, that's the level on which a lot of these really delicate situations ought to be handled. And when we start to try to turn it into policy and we flatten things out, I just don't think people are
Yep.
capable of seeing the humanity of others at scale from that distance. And so if you and I start to have a pro-abortion conversation or an anti-abortion conversation, there's endless examples that people will throw in. Well, we can
Yeah.
come up with endless exceptions, like the 14-year-old who is raped and then is pregnant. Should she have to, the one of the most powerful anti-abortion, I guess, examples that I know of is when you see these people in Planned Parenthood selling baby parts. Like we've got a market for this, and so that's
Yeah.
just horrendous and beyond barbaric, the
Yes.
disregard for human life. But at the end of the day, there are situations that come up in people's lives where people who really care about that individual and the long-term health and all of the ethics might choose to make exceptions. But the way that I have moved a lot on this topic too, because I used to be pro-choice and now I don't think I would use that framework. I wouldn't say I am pro the state being involved in putting down. It's like using legislation to make up for a lack of spiritual and moral
Yes.
grounding.
Yes.
And that's a
It
blunt instrument.
it is. And we've outsourced not just our moral decision making, our ethical decision making, but our family decision making. We've outsourced all of this to the state or to corporations. And yeah,
Well,
uh,
and when it comes to sexuality, that's a really interesting one over the last few years. Now we have the schools, the government's education arm deciding to educate all students in a particular way about sex. And so we have a consent-based sexual morality now,
mhm.
which is, I think it's very troubling in a lot of ways. I don't know exactly what to make of that because I also do come from the left, which is a very you do you,
Yep.
you're not hurting me. But then when you see so much proliferation of pornography and this sort of like this taking over of the polyamory ethical non-monogamy set into things. I don't know what to make of that. I find myself really recoiling from it, but
It's
having no
disgusting.
spiritual backbone, nothing I can point to and say, but that's not how we do things, because apparently we do things however we want to do things.
Yeah. Well, and look what we get. We get miserable people who justify what is actually simply promiscuity and addictive behavior.
Mm.
This comes from trauma. It comes from brainwashing. It's not healthy and normal. No, no, it's not a healthy, normal human sexual instinct that we're just now recognizing. It's not. Um, and it's yeah. This is a really difficult one for me because I'm gay, and I remember the days when we actually didn't have some legal protections that we were actually entitled to. I mean, it used to be, I've seen it happen personally where families who wouldn't speak to the gay son for 30 years, and he spent 30 years with a partner. And as soon as the partner died, I have seen this personally and professionally. I'm not passing along urban legend. I've seen it. That the family will show up 30 years later after no contact and literally steal the corpse from the partner and then take the estate. And it was
Oh
perfectly
my
legal
God.
because men couldn't be married or women
Yeah.
couldn't be married,
Yeah.
right? That was an injustice.
That
That was an
is.
actual legal injustice that needed to stop. Whether you like it or not, whether you like the fact that they lived as a couple or not, it was an injustice under our American system.
Mhm.
However, we didn't stop there. We gays and now queer and trans and all this stuff. And look where we ended up. I did not expect to see the world this way at 50, but I'm not ashamed to be gay,
Mhm.
but I am more tentative. I mean, obviously, people are going to know. Anybody who listens to me is going to pick. I've got it in my voice. I've got it in my mannerisms. I
Mhm.
realize I'm not fooling anybody, but and it's unconscious. I'm not putting on a show. It's just baked in at this point. That's just the way it is. But I'm sure less willing to volunteer that information, even if it's relevant, because people are correctly and appropriately looking with a raised eyebrow at people who come out and offer their sexuality, especially gay people or anybody who calls themselves queer. Our whatever good name homosexuals like me may have had at some point is completely tarnished and ruined now. We have no social capital left to spend with normal people. So I'm not going to push it. And I would say to other gay people, because I see this a lot. A lot of gay people are waking up to this, and their first instinct is to get really angry and to start screaming about homophobia.
Mhm.
I'll tell you what, honey, you keep that right up and you see where the fuck it gets you.
Mhm.
Because people aren't putting up with this shit anymore. You are going to provoke a severe and possibly very violent backlash if you keep this up. And that's just the way it is. People have had enough. And uh,
Sounds like you're like the counter to pride is humility.
yes, pride is a sin.
Mhm.
Pride is a sin. It's not something that's supposed to be celebrated,
Mhm.
right? And it should never have been made a synonym for normal proportional self-worth. That's that's what we claimed we were after, right? We said we're full humans like everybody else, but
Mhm.
then we have to have pride in ourselves to counter all the shame. We were kind of, what we were? We were Ibram X Kendi for gay. Because Ibram X Kendi says the only remedy to past discrimination is
Mhm.
present discrimination.
Mhm.
We decided that the only way to cure past shame was to have current pride, vanity, narcissism. That's what it's not, it's vanity and narcissism. And we took it absolutely as far as it could go. And some of them are taking it even further. How can I see gay people normal. I understand where they're coming from. I get it. I think they're wrong. And I think their eyes are gonna open a little bit more over time. But I see normal gay people starting to get really reactive and really upset about this and to start accusing straight people of homophobia again. Um, Look, I'm gay too. I'm 50 years old. I remember what it was like in past eras. I've had the same experiences you all have had. I've been beat up too. I cannot blame straight people for seeing gay as a red flag anymore. I can't blame them. They're not irrational bigots. They're not reacting based on urban legend. They're reacting to the world in front of them right now. It is not their fault that they don't know that you are a good homosexual, not one of the bad ones. They're not discriminating against you. They're not decivil rightsing you. I think we minorities We have been taking and refusing to give. We are not reciprocating in these exchanges. We're expecting only other people can have understanding for us. Only other people extend grace to us. We won't give any of it back. We're not in a position to be making demands anymore. Okay, gay people, do you understand that? We are not in a position where we can make demands. And the more demands we make now, the more we're going to bring down on our heads. That's the way I see it. People have had enough.
It is interesting. I wouldn't have predicted that we'd end up where we are right now
Me
in
neither.
terms of sexuality, sexual orientation, the politicization of this, and the way it's sort of run away from those of us who were really pro gay rights.
Yep.
I when I was a kid, when I was in
Your
high
essay.
school.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Your essay, I really liked it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your comments on it too. It was good to get your feedback. I feel like some of those things, it's like no matter how delicately you try to say something, people are going to flatten what you're saying down to a caricature and hear it
Yes.
wrong because they want to hear it wrong because it's like the you took the abortion pill and it's the Republicans' fault.
Yep.
Um, when I was in high school, I had uh I had a really nasty social thing happen to me where I started going out with a boy and his ex-girlfriend didn't like that. She was hurt and jealous and she spread a rumor that I was a slut.
Okay.
I was a I was probably more naive than most of my peers. I was still complete virgin and somewhat just embarrassed about those things, kind of prude and
Yeah.
and it was really shocking to me to be having these rumors spread about me that were really graphic sort of
Okay.
things that were happening to me. So I lost a group of friends that I'd been hanging out with for a while because this girl was part of that group and they decided to side with her. And I had a couple of the kids that I knew very peripherally took me under their wing and were really sweet to me. And I had a new group of kids that I sat with at lunch and hung out with after school, and they were the gay kids. It was like this little group of people who were like, yeah, we know what it's like to feel like an outcast, and you can come
Yeah.
sit with us. And these became some of my really, really good friends. And it always like it left such a warm feeling. And I got to know a group of people who were really struggling with an aspect of their identity that I had a lot of empathy for. And I just went through life feeling that way about my gay friends and about gay people in general. It was just this warm sort of, they deserve more than what they're getting in society right now. This is a raw deal. And so I was a um very pro gay marriage, very
Yeah.
was it just like 2008 that we were arguing about this? This seems like it was just yesterday, and
I
it
know
was
it's not very long ago.
and the Democrats weren't even for gay
Nope.
marriage at that
Obama
point,
wasn't for it.
right?
Everybody
And
forgets now.
do you remember the slippery slope arguments that the
Yes.
anti-gay marriage people were saying? They're like, next thing you know, it's going to be bestiality, it's going to be whatever.
Yeah, and then it happened.
And that's what I'm saying is like it's how did we it's like it's like a little kid who's rolling a ball along and then they're kicking it down the road. They can control how far it goes. And then there's a hill and suddenly the ball is rolling rapidly down the hill and the kid is chasing it and they cannot catch up with it. And it's like by was this a natural was it something that it was inevitable that once you start to open yourselves up to more freedom with sexual mores, the whole thing runs away from you and you no longer have any argument anymore? Was that all? Because I didn't see that.
I didn't see it either, but I'm afraid I have to acknowledge that some voices on the religious right did see it more accurately than I did. They did.
And I thought they
Obviously,
were.
it does not matter how much.
Yeah.
And some people listening will very much dislike this. I get it. I'm not entirely comfortable with it either, but I
Yeah.
don't have to like something to recognize that it's true. They were right on this one. We did not have any brakes built into this. I don't know if it's possible. It might be possible to build brakes in, but I'm not sure. I'm not convinced of it yet. This may have been inevitable. Maybe it was not inevitable, but it did happen. And I think at the very least, I think what we should be able to agree on societally is that this utopian idea that all you need is love, all you need is complete freedom from all regulation. And by regulation, I don't just mean laws, I mean social pushback.
Mm-hmm.
I mean uh, cultural guardrails. They're all gone now. All of them are gone. There are none left. The kernel of truth is I don't know of any society in history who stopped regulating sexuality and who ended up in a good place as a society. All cultures have rules regulating sexuality. Some of them are brutal. Some of them, like the actually misogynistic cultures of the Middle East, treat women as less than human, less than animals.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them go too far. But simply because some of them go too far does not mean that the cultural regulation of sexuality is itself an abuse. It is not.
Mm-hmm.
We need it. We need some form of it. And we have none now.
I would agree with you completely on that. And I don't know where to start with that because it feels like we've just lost our ability to have a consensus. And we are trying so hard to build culture back up through laws. I think that I would, and I guess I swung pretty far toward the libertarian for a while, and now I'm sort of reconsidering that as well. I think that there is some regulation needed. I think my libertarian streak was a reaction to the over management and over
Yep.
bureaucratization that I perceive in our culture, especially after COVID, which
Yes.
was just horrific. But I would see room for some kind of legal moratorium on all forms of sex work, paid sex, like prostitution and surrogacy, which I would put in the sex work category. Those kinds of things. I would see that banned for legal. Like if someone wants to freely engage.
This is not outrageous. Leslie, prostitution was always illegal all the time until recently.
Now we have OnlyFans. And it's all legal. I mean, it's like college girls doing, it's like how many women have a story about how they one time were a cam girl or were, it's going to be massive in the next generation, this monetization of sex.
It's terrible. And see, the thing is that I think people need to remember is if we don't regulate ourselves as a culture, then some force is going to get into the law and do it for us. So if we don't want the state or the federal government prying into our bedrooms, we had better goddamn well keep our curtains drawn and keep our vulgar private activities private. Get it off the street. Stop talking about it on television.
Mhm.
Stop walking around in that outfit. Stop screaming about, stop telling people about your disgusting sexuality, right? All of this stuff needs to go firmly back in the bedroom where it should have stayed.
Mhm.
If we don't do this voluntarily, and we would all be happier. I know the queers, there's no queers are going to listen to this, whatever queer is. But if they did, of course, they'd be screaming right now.
Yeah.
They would not believe this, and I would not have believed it myself 15 years ago, but nevertheless, it is true. You queers, you will be happier too. You will have a happier and more fulfilling life when you no longer have the desire or the social ability to parade your private vulgarity in front of everybody. You will be better off because you will be forced to be a real human being
A real
who has
person.
more to offer to the world than what's in your underwear.
Mm-hmm.
You will all be better off. But if we don't,
We need like a morality campaign that says something like, you don't have to keep it in the closet, but please keep it in the bedroom.
Yeah, or or close the bedroom door.
Yeah.
Like, remember that there is a room called a bedroom,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that the things that happen in the bedroom are different than the ones that happen in the dining room that has the bay window facing the street.
Yeah.
This is not hard stuff, right?
No.
Uh, I, it, and it's amazing to me how quickly it happened
Mhm.
overnight, almost overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like that. Like I feel like if I had gone to bed in 2012 and woken up in 2023, I would have been
2024.
like, what the hell dream am I having?
Well, it has accelerated. And I think the 2015 Supreme Court decision that gave us gay marriage is at least a chronological
Mhm.
fulcrum, because after that, the acceleration that was the beginning of the acceleration.
Mhm. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's so
and
interesting though, because marriage, that's the thing that people were striving for. It's the ability to what? Connect in a meaningful way with one person and claim that love as a societally sanctioned position of importance and value. And yet, what that does nothing in relationship to the polyamory, BDSM, pornographic choking culture we've got now.
well, here's what I think.
Hmm.
Um, there are very few gay men. They exist. I know some of them, but they're few. There are very few gay men who truly they don't want the kind of marriage that marriage always was.
Hmm.
You you give me 20 gay married men couples, and I will give you 19 who are fucking anybody they want, having threesomes, although say we have an open marriage. It's the vast majority.
Hmm.
Always was, always will be.
Hmm.
Always.
It's male sexuality
It's
on
male
steroids. Yeah.
sexuality, correct,
Hmm.
without a countervailing female
Limiting
check.
factor. Yeah.
That is simply nature. That is what
Hmm.
happens.
Hmm.
Um, and the lesbians, well, they had the whole cohabiting thing forever down way before marriage came along, so
Hmm.
they do it differently.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, the problem is we gays who pushed for gay marriage, I was among them.
Hmm.
Um, First of all, I now believe we should have stopped at civil unions. The only thing that we really had a moral right to demand was legal equality.
Hmm.
And legal
Hmm.
equality was accomplished by civil union laws. It needed to be
Hmm.
something needed to happen to force the states to honor the contracts of other states, because even though that's in the Constitution,
Hmm.
the full faith and credit clause, it doesn't actually exist because it's only selectively enforced. So I think we needed to do something that said, okay, if I have a civil union in New Hampshire, Missouri has to recognize that I am my partner's legal next of kin for medical decision making purposes, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But we could have done that. We could have done that. But we wanted more than that. And we wanted what you just said, Leslie, which was we wanted to force society to emotionally value our relationships the same way that they emotionally valued heterosexual relationships.
Hmm.
That was a demand that we had no entitlement to at all. It's
Hmm.
also a demand that cannot be made real. You cannot force people to value what you value simply by trying to force them to do it. And the reality is, society is never going to value gay marriage the way it ought to value marriage between heterosexuals. It's not ever gonna happen.
You
It's
know
just
what's really
not.
interesting about what you just said? You're pointing out that it should have stopped at civil unions and that we didn't have the right to legally regulate marriage, which is a sacrament and a spiritual union. And that is, I've never thought about this before in this particular way. I've heard that argument before, of course, but um, by getting the government involved with spiritual regulation in that way, did we sort of break something a little bit? And by, when you're talking about the value of a same-sex union versus a heterosexual union, yeah, they're fundamentally different in some ways, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just thinking about procreation and
Hmm.
the meaning for marriage uh, between but a heterosexual couple being that it is a tie that binds them to the raising and developing of their family. So they are
Yes.
bound in this way that they can't easily get out of, and they can't shirk their duties to
Except
this.
they can now because we
Right.
have
And
no
that's
fault
the thing
divorce.
is like, when we changed what marriage meant to encompass relationships that were, as you just made this argument about the promiscuity that's prevalent in a lot of gay male unions, marriages, when we define that as marriage and we take the word marriage and we apply it back to heterosexual relationships, now with that new meaning, did we sort of open Pandora's box a little bit?
I
I
think
mean,
so.
I don't know.
I
I'm
think we
wondering
did.
if there's a connection.
I think so. I'm very disturbed to see the gayification of
Mm,
straight people. I'm
mm,
very disturbed. The kind of hedonistic, libertine, debauched, excessive practices that are common in gay male sex culture are now common among heterosexuals. That straight people, you took the absolute worst of what we had to offer and you incorporated it into your own lives, not to your benefit, to your detriment.
Do people always follow the avant-garde? Was gay the avant-garde of sex here in
I
this
think
culture
so.
now?
I think it's part of it, but you see this in, and I'm no expert on this. I can only gloss it on the surface, but we know this now. You see in societies that are socially crumbling and their value systems are going away, they get into sexual debauchery.
Mm-hmm.
Things that were illegal before are now compulsory, right?
Mm,
All perversions must now be in shop windows and on the street. Look at Weimar Germany. Look at
mm-hmm.
Rome at its the beginning of its decline. Look at you can see instances of this everywhere. Sexual libertinism correlates very strongly with societies in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we may be on all these issues that we've talked about: sexuality, reproduction, male and female, our relationship to tech companies, all this stuff. We only get 70 to 80 years on this earth, all of us. So we're only seeing a tiny little window in the span of time, and we'll never know what comes after us.
Mm-hmm.
But we can look back, and I just don't. I worry that maybe the fundamental human condition is that we are constantly on a pendulum, that we've
Mm-hmm.
always been on a pendulum, and that we
We
always will
always will
be.
be.
Maybe that is the natural
Maybe
state.
that's what we're supposed to do, is just create things to which we can react.
But that's the thing. Are we doomed, or are we fundamentally reactionary by nature? Is this
Yeah.
the nature of humanity? It might be. I hope that it isn't,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of people who hope that it isn't, and you hear that hope when they talk fondly about the 1990s, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You and I have said similar things, I'm sure. Hey, we really got it in the 90s. We got the balance right, right?
Right.
Like it was okay to be gay, and in some circles it was even a little bit cool.
Mm-hmm.
But we still knew that diddling kids was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Yeah.
still knew that beating up fags was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe the 1990s. I think I'm more on the side. I think that was not a stable place. It was a nice place to be while it lasted, but I don't think we can have it back. I don't think it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I'm at least 60% betting on the side of, yep, the default of human nature is the pendulum.
Yeah, I'm more and more with you on that all the time. And I wonder if, just like if you imagine a pendulum swinging from left to right and back again, well, at some points in that swing, it does hit some nice little spots that look like balance, but perhaps they're just part of the journey from one side to the other. And if it slows to a stop, I mean, that would kind of be hell, wouldn't it?
Maybe.
Hmm.
I don't know. I, I know that I crave stability, something closer to the normal morality, more normal-ish morality that I remember as a child. With all of its problems, nothing was ever perfect. I crave that stability, and I want my utopian world. I, I want it. I want everything I didn't want as a I that I didn't want as a young man,
Mm.
and now I can't have it. Right? Um, the primacy of family as as the most important unit in
Mhm.
society.
Mhm.
Two-parent households. Divorce should be rare and should only happen in cases of uncurable abuse. Yes, I am saying that I think couples should not simply be easily legally allowed to get rid of each other just because the spark is gone. If you have children, I think that you have a higher moral duty. So no, I don't think you should have no fault divorce. Suck it.
Mhm.
That's what I think. Um, but can we have any of this back? I don't know. Would we would we stay there stably over time? I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the thoughts that I've had about this, when you talk about, is this just the human condition, this pendulum? Well, I think about how throughout the ages, people have always, we look back and we see, wow, gosh, things must have been so simple in the 70s. I was just a little kid. I don't remember them. But I can imagine, I've had this thought before. My mom going to the grocery store and looking at cans of things and not having to worry about whether it was GMO or organic
Yes,
or
yes,
food dye or whatever. It was just, I'm just going to get those tomatoes. It's tomatoes, so I get tomatoes, or it's
right.
bread, so I buy bread. I don't think about it. And now the expense and the complication of that process, and
Yeah, and unfortunately, there were a lot of things we accepted that we didn't know better about in those days too. Like in the
right.
70s, our food supply was already, I mean, Robert Kennedy's talking about this a lot, the additives and the well, there's
Uh,
additives and but it's also like our entire way we view food. It's come to be normal that we live on this surfeit of carbohydrates and sugar,
yeah,
right?
the
Like
food
if you look
pyramid.
at the typical, it's everywhere. It's
Yeah,
from you go to a restaurant and it doesn't matter what you order, whether it's seafood or steak or
it's
a
on a bed
sandwich
of
or
pasta
something.
or rice.
The three fully 75% of the calories on that plate come from carbohydrates, and
Yeah,
carbohydrates are sugar,
yeah.
right? People say carbs and sugar, but carbs are sugar. The
Hmm.
metabolism is the same. Um, and maybe 20% of it is actual animal protein,
Hmm.
and that is actually good for us. We're relearning that now, that it wasn't fat that was the problem, but the fats we're getting are all highly processed seed oils rather than
Hmm.
things like lard and
Right.
tallow that we even McDonald's fried in beef fat until the end of the 1980s,
Hmm.
right? Then they
Hmm.
replaced it with all this shit. But even in the 70s, Leslie, we we this whole, like, I remember you talk about your mom buying a can of tomatoes.
Hmm.
Um I had some interesting conversations with my mother about food waste changing over her lifetime.
Hmm.
So um when my mother was a child in the 50s and the early 60s, um, that was the post-war baby boom was the introduction of things like canned vegetables and then frozen vegetables.
Oh, yeah.
And then and this was like, oh my God, every housewife was like, thank God I don't have to sit here and shuck peas by hand anymore. I can
Right.
buy a can. Then frozen veg came out, and frozen veg is higher quality than canned
Mhm.
veg. And so that was a new luxury. That was the new scientific, modern, hygienic way of
Mhm.
getting good nutrition, right? So there was an inculcated belief in the progress that we had made in food processing, and people went along with it. But what they didn't know, we're learning now,
Mhm.
right? Um,
Yeah.
all of those things that, if you were a hip, up to date mom or housewife in the mid 20th century, you served frozen vegetables and prepared foods and stuff because this was the way that modern people lived. And now we're like, oh, that was a pretty bad detour.
Yeah, it's like it was this thing we didn't even know was lurking.
We didn't know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And yet now in hindsight we can see it so clearly. But they had their own things that they were worried about then that were different. I struggle to put myself in that place and know what they were exactly, but I know that there were some. And I know, like, my dad has talked about the drills when he was a kid, and I guess it would have been the 50s, the maybe the 60s, the bomb drills that they would do and get under their
Duck and
desks.
cover.
Yeah, they were afraid that he would say, what is it? Bend over, put your head between your knees, and kiss your ass goodbye. Was the
Yep.
and it was they had this fear over them of planetary extinction because the bombs were going to go off. So
We have the same fears now.
we have the same fears now, and you can go back in time at different points, and people have always had their existential crises that they've gone through as a zeitgeist, and in
Yep.
with the to the extent that they're connected to a larger community. There's been this anxiety or that anxiety, or people had higher rates of child mortality and maternal mortality before modern sanitation and the some of the increased medical practices, the better medical practices that we have, which are that's a whole nother conversation where that's going. But I guess I like what you said about how we only have 70 to 80 years on the planet, and we're here right now. These are our crises right now. And to some extent, I think that there might be room. This is how I try to do it anyway, to see it as the quest that I've been given, the opportunity to feel like things are important, to feel like I'm a part of something that's important in my time. And I don't mean me in particular, like anything I'm doing, but just that drive. Like, I had this feeling one time I almost had a car accident and I was terrified. It was like one of those near misses where I
Yeah.
feel my heart jump into my throat and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, like everything is shaking, and I the first thought I had after I didn't have the car accident was, I don't want to die. I have like all these things to do. Like, I started thinking about all the things I'm looking forward to, or I need to do, or need to take care of my kids, or I can't die now. I've got all these things I have to do. And then I thought, in a way, wouldn't I like to have that be every moment of my life, still having a quest before me?
Hmm.
And I don't know. These are just some kind of weird existential thoughts
They're not
that I
weird.
have.
They're not weird. That's a universal train of thought.
Mm,
It's it's expressed in I won't be able to quote it verbatim. But some people will know this. People have said this to me when I've complained about finding myself, and um I'm very disappointed, sometimes to the point of being bitter, to find myself at 50 years old seeing the world, I believe, more clearly and with a view that is closer to the truth than I ever had before. And now I see value in everything that I ran away from and rejected as younger. I see value in family. I know what I know what I won't have now that I don't have a family and I'll never have kids of my own. I value things that I did not value before, and
mhm,
I think I now value the things that are the warp and woof of a good human life,
mm,
at least closer to that. And I'm bitter. I'm angry that I'm
mm,
50, and now that I'm mature enough, I finally grew up enough to value these things. I can't have them
Mm.
both because of my personal circumstances, but also because of societal. And there are a lot of people out there who can't have the good life that we thought we could. And so it makes me angry and bitter. And so somebody will say, there's a quote from Tolkien from Lord of the Rings, which I've just read for the first time. And another thing that I made fun of that is actually far philosophically
Those
deeper
are
than I ever gave
amazing
it credit
books.
for.
Yeah.
Um, that it's dialogue between Gandalf and Frodo, and Gandalf says something alike, you know, Frodo is complaining, I didn't want this mission. I didn't choose this. This is a burden. I don't want this. And Gandalf says something like, none of us choose what work is given to us. The only choice we have is how we carry it out. That's a paraphrase. It's
Yeah.
not verbatim.
Hmm.
But it's true.
Hmm.
Um, I don't, I can't always feel, I know it's true. I can't always feel it. And I rebel against it sometimes. And I just want to be bitter and ungrateful. And sometimes I am.
Hmm.
But nevertheless, we don't have any choice. We have to simply deal with what we have.
I think that's
Shitty as that is.
so well put. And I wonder sometimes I rebelled against my own set of things and have my own sets of bitternesses. And yet I wonder what I would have felt if things had gone differently. I would have felt forced into things and felt like I was rebelling against things. And it's such a complicated thing being a human.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Josh, if I were your neighbor, I'd come over to borrow sugar and then you'd have to delicately figure out how to get me out of your house because I would stay all afternoon. Yeah.
I have a feeling I wouldn't be trying to get you gone. I'd be trying to figure out how to get you and everybody else to stay for dinner.
Yeah.
Uh, I know it would be nice if we could do this in person.
I know it would. Thank you yeah, I've kept you for almost 2 hours now,
No,
so I should let you do
it's been
things.
really fun. Thank you, Leslie.
I love talking with you. Thank you
Likewise.
for sharing all your thoughts so openly and just so earnestly and keep doing what you do. I love it.
And you. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Josh.